Let's get to the latest here on James Harden. You're watching Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Appreciate all of you for being a part of the show and hanging out with us. According to a report from The Athletic, James Harden still wants to leave Philadelphia, and he wants to play for the Los Angeles Clippers. His stance has not changed in wanting to get traded by Daryl Morey, given the way that Daryl Morey handled the situation heading into NBA free agency. A whole lot to talk about on the show today, so stay tuned. First, though, whenever the Sixers do make a move, and if they do trade James Harden, we're going to talk about it right here on the program. We're approaching 12,000 subscribers. It's been a blast to grow this channel. Let's continue to grow our 76ers Now community. Hit that sub button for year-round coverage that's informative, entertaining, and insightful. All right, the latest on Harden here. So 2 weeks ago, he opted into his contract on June 29th, and then he asked for a trade. We went live that day after the report from Adrian Wojnarowski, and at the time, the two teams that were interested in him from the jump, Los Angeles Clippers and the New York Knicks. With Harden opting into the final year of his deal, he's basically playing on a one-year contract worth $35.5 million. And from the beginning of this, the Clippers have always been the most talked about team. They need a guy who can pressure the rim. They need a point guard who can initiate the offense, set things up, a solid distributor, especially if they hold on to Kawhi Leonard as well as Paul George. Russell Westbrook was able to do that to some degree last year, but James Harden would certainly be an upgrade as a guy who had a career-best assist-to-turnover ratio last year, led the NBA in assists, shot the second-best percentage from three, and would be a good fit alongside Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And a reason why Harden might want to go to the Los Angeles Clippers, he grew up in the LA area. So this report coming from Sam Amick of The Athletic, and it goes as such: Harden's stance has not changed. A source close to him told The Athletic he still wants to leave Philadelphia. He's still upset with how Daryl Morey handled the situation heading into possible free agency last month. And even with the recent revelation that Harden attended the same NBA Players Association party as Sixers co-star Joel Embiid and former Sixers owner Michael Rubin in Vegas during the Summer League, he is still determined to start next year in a Clippers jersey. And that's not the only party that Harden attended with some of his current teammates who could be former teammates. He was at Michael Rubin's all-white party in the Hamptons with Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris. He was seen having a one-on-one conversation with Sixers owner Josh Harris. So my thoughts on this, they've certainly been ongoing, right, as we get more information, because information can change context here. Is this trade request for real? Or is James Harden in his feelings looking for leverage here? He doesn't have much leverage, but the remaining leverage that he has is he trying to strong-arm the Sixers with that leverage. I also think that James Harden, somewhat of a sensitive guy, and a guy who, when he doesn't get his way, he pouts, he has bad body language, and he stops trying. We have literal proof of this with the Houston Rockets when he gained weight, with the Brooklyn Nets when he demanded a trade, and now, third team, in as many stops, he is once again asking to get dealt. This is what we do know about this entire situation. Daryl Morey is not trading James Harden for cents on the dollar. He was so patient with Ben Simmons, whose value was diminishing and was worse at the time than Harden's is now, even though Harden is entering his age 34 season and Ben Simmons is still in his mid-20s. But Daryl Morey was able to get back Harden for a guy who literally did not play a minute that year in Ben Simmons. So he's going to wait this out, and he's going to be patient about this, just like he was with that Ben Simmons situation. More from The Athletic here. Despite all of that relevant history, and in spite of the fact that Morey may know Harden and all of his complexities better than anyone in the NBA, rival executives with whom I spoke with at the Summer League were universally convinced that the Sixers are now attempting to keep James Harden. Discontent be damned. The sluggish trade talks between the Sixers and the Clippers about Harden would seem to support this stance. Morey is known to be asking for the kind of return that, as of Tuesday afternoon, left a strong impression that he had no genuine interest in getting a deal done anytime soon. And that goes back to the original point. Daryl Morey is going to wait this out until he believes he is getting equal value back for James Harden, who had a good year last year, but once again, he fell apart in the NBA playoffs. So today's poll question is this: do you want James Harden back on the Sixers? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. We're live right now. I'm looking at the live poll, 72% saying no thus far. What's interesting about this is that Harden comes out, he requests the trade, and the whole reason why Daryl Morey kept Harden in his camp, quote, in the dark, was that they wanted to avoid tampering allegations that the NBA hit them with last year. And the reason they got hit with those tampering allegations is because they brought in PJ Tucker and Daniel House, two guys who James Harden wanted on the Sixers roster. But now, word is that Daryl Morey is open-minded and having Harden return. Joel Embiid, in that interview with Rachel Nichols, said that he wants Harden back in Philadelphia. And during his introductory press conference, Patrick Beverley also asked James Harden, who he's really good friends with, to stay with the Sixers as well. And Harden was a reason why Beverley wanted to sign that one-year contract with Philadelphia. And I imagine that Daryl Morey here is holding out hope that they can reconcile this current rift. And I believe that they're going to be able to do that given the long history between these two, because Harden and Morey go way back. October of 2012, that's when Daryl Morey made one of the most significant trades in the history of the NBA, trading away Jeremy Lamb for a revolutionary offensive player in Harden. So that happened in October of 2012 when Morey made that deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder. In July 2017, Harden signed the richest deal ever at the time for any player in the history of the NBA. February of 2022, after Morey left Houston, comes to Philadelphia, trades away Ben Simmons, Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, future first-round picks for Harden. And then June of 2023, that's when Harden asked for a trade, and as of right now, he's still looking to get dealt. Something to also think about here is this. If James Harden and Tobias Harris do return, and the Philadelphia 76ers do decide to run it back, both Toby and the Beard are on expiring contracts. So a couple of things here. You get both of them back on an expiring contract. They could be motivated to get the bag next offseason to try to increase their value. For Harden, trying to prove to other teams that he can still play with all the mileage. And for Tobias Harris, trying to prove that, yeah, I may have been overpaid, but I can still be a really good player in this league. The other part of that is if they run it back, Harden and Harris return, in 2024, you're getting rid of Harden's salary of $35.5 million and Toby's salary worth near $40 million. That's a lot of money to open up to surround Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey with the necessary pieces to try to compete for an NBA championship if the Sixers are not able to do that this year. And the free agency crop next year is pretty solid. Your unrestricted free agents, and then we'll take a look at the restricted free agents. Jaylen Brown, we'll see what happens with him. And if he signs that extension with the Boston Celtics, I imagine he is going to. Homegrown talent who has really gotten better and improved throughout his NBA career. DeMar DeRozan also going to be on the open market. Pascal Siakam is a player who I wouldn't hate having on the Sixers. He has familiarity with Nick Nurse, good defender, but I wouldn't trade Harden for him. I would try to trade Tobias Harris for him. And then Klay Thompson, also entering the final year of his contract. And then you shift gears and you take a gander at the restricted free agents. Tyrese Maxey, if the Sixers do not give him that extension, there's an October deadline for that. If they don't get a deal done by then, he becomes that restricted free agent. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis, all potential unrestricted free agents if they opt out of the final years of their contracts. Let's take a look at this glass half full approach, right? If Harden does come back, it's for 1 year. On the bright side, you get a guy who's motivated, who's trying to play well, who comes into the season in good shape, and you have that level of synergy. continuity, camaraderie, because he's played with Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and Tobias Harris, if he returns as well. The negative of Harden coming back, this would be glass half empty, is that he's disgruntled, and he stops trying, and he comes into camp in bad shape, and he doesn't have that motivation. Now, I would find that hard to believe. If Harden were to take that mental stance when he's playing alongside a good friend in Embiid, they've been able to develop a good relationship. He's been a little bit of a mentor for Tyrese Maxey, but as Patrick Beverley and PJ Tucker, are they going to allow Harden to act a fool? And is Nick Nurse going to tolerate that when he's always been about accountability? And that's what he talked about on the Tyrese Maxey podcast. There are also concerns about Harden declining as a player, and this would fit under the bill of the glass half empty approach, is that Harden might be getting close to being washed. But if he comes back on 1 year, then you can let go of him next year, free up some money, and sign a better free agent. The analytics show that Harden's game's starting to decline a little bit. Harden averaged 13.5 drives to the basket per game last year, 10 fewer than he did 5 seasons ago. He scored fewer points off those drives than he had since 2013-2014, nearly a decade. A career-low 25% of his shot attempts came at the rim. Second Spectrum, they track a stat called blow-by rate. It's a measurement of how often a ball handler dusts and gets by his defender off the dribble. In his last full season in Houston, Harden blew by his defender 10.1 times per 100 drives. Last year in Philly, the rate was down to 3.7 per 100. So that goes to show you the play starting to slip a little bit, the athletic explosion starting to go away a bit as James Harden gets a little bit older. He is also 7th in most minutes played among active players right now in the NBA. So with that, another question for the audience here. Get that comment section going once again. We're also 30 likes away from 100. Help us get there on our live stream. Grade James Harden as a player right now. 1 to 100. I know a lot of y'all like to play NBA 2K on the sticks, so have some fun with that. Last 4 years for the Beard. 2 of them, or at least the last year and a half with Philadelphia here. It's crazy that as recently as 2019-2020, Harden was putting up insane numbers. And then he gets disgruntled with Houston, forces a trade to the Brooklyn Nets, stopped trying at the end of that Rockets tenure. The hamstring injury started to come to the forefront, and he really hasn't been the same player since. But in 2019-2020, 34 points per game, 7.5 dimes, 6.5 rebounds, and shot 35.5% from 3. The following year, split between Houston and Brooklyn, 24.5 points per game, almost 11 assists. So the distributing numbers became a little bit better when he's playing with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, even though they didn't actually play that much together. That's why all of those moves became a disaster for Brooklyn. Now none of them are on that team. 8 rebounds, 36.5% from 3. His first season with Philly was okay, and then this past year, led the league in assists, highest mark since 2020-2021, solid rebounder as he always is because he's always going to pad his stats. And then almost 39% from 3, the second best mark in his NBA career. Now, if Harden does get traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, who could the Sixers get back in a trade? We have you covered here. That's why you subscribe to the show for the best Sixers talk and NBA talk on YouTube. Marquee Clippers trade targets. Let's start here. Paul George, excellent two-way wing. He's been injured far too much throughout his career, but when he's on the floor, he is a lethal player who can get a bucket offensively, has a great offensive bag, and then defensively can lock down some of the premier offensive players in the game. Kawhi Leonard, value has diminished a little bit, but we've seen that Nick Nurse was able to win a championship with Kawhi, and Kawhi that year won NBA Finals MVP. A lot of people like to say that Nick Nurse runs his superstars into the ground and he plays them a bunch of minutes. He didn't do that with Kawhi. I imagine he's not going to do that with Joel Embiid, and it worked in Toronto. It can work in Philadelphia. Norm Powell is a player who I've continued to talk about as one of the more realistic trade targets on the Clippers that the Sixers could get back for Harden, because I don't believe that Steve Ballmer is going to be willing to give away Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. They probably want James Harden to be that guy who can pressure the rim with those two wings. Terrence Mann in a backcourt between him and Tyrese Maxey certainly intrigues me. Two very solid young players. And then Nishan Bones-Hyland, fun player out of ECU, drafted in the first round by the Denver Nuggets, traded at the NBA trade deadline last year. A fun Lou Williams type of player who is not afraid to get a shot up from really anywhere on the floor, but sometimes if he's cold, he could be a detriment on the offensive end. So you go from marquee Clippers trade targets to secondary Clippers trade targets. Let's just say you get a Norm Powell. Maybe you can get two of these players in that deal as well. Norm Powell and Terrence Mann would be a massive win for Daryl Morey, in my opinion. Marcus Morris wouldn't be a bad big, although the Sixers have a little bit of a jumble in that front court. Robert Covington, we know him well, solid 3-and-D wing. Nicholas Batum, he could stretch the floor as a big with a lot of high leverage playoff experience. And then Jason Preston, first-round pick, played his college ball at Ohio, made it to the NCAA tournament. He wasn't even recruited out of high school. Cool story for him. Season cut short last year due to injury. So which player or players would you want back in a James Harden trade? Just let me know down in the comment section the package that you think would be ideal for James Harden, because he can still play. I don't think that you're going to get a Paul George or a Kawhi Leonard, but can you get a solid package back for a guy who's been productive, who throughout his career has played a lot of basketball? While he's had some no-shows in the playoffs, he's come up short. He at least has a lot of playoff-level experience. I mean, you look at the numbers of what he's done with Philadelphia in both his half season in 2021 and 2022, full season this past year, and in the NBA playoffs. We know he's going to distribute the basketball, and I give him credit for kind of extending his prime years and still having that really good vision. We know that James Harden is going to be able to score it, even though, as evidenced by the analytics that we talked about a little while ago, his blow-by rate is down, finishing around the rim, not as efficient as what he used to be. But if he can make up for that lack of burst and finishing in the trenches, with him being a good three-point shooter, 38.5% this past year, then you can certainly get by if you're Harden with being a productive offensive player. And I think that he would be a good fit with Kawhi and PG-13. In the playoffs, yes, his numbers do go down, but the pace changes. You allow a little bit more physicality. And Joel Embiid, frankly, needs to play better in some of these pressure cooker moments. The pros and cons of Harden's game. We've broken down this, bad English, a couple of times here on the show. Elite assist man, very, very good vision. The two-man game that he can run with bigs, but also finding shooters on that arc is special. I thought that last year the Sixers offense was at its best when Harden was like the number 3 scorer behind Embiid and Maxey. When he tries to become that go-to ISO guy, it gets painful to watch. The ball dies, the possessions get stale, because he doesn't have that dribble drive game that he used to have. Last year, the numbers, the slash line, pretty good. 21 points per game, 44% from the field, 38.5% from three. In game 1, was awesome against Boston with that game winner. Comes back in game 4. He does it again. 45 and 41 in those games respectively, and looked to be vintage James Harden. That game 1 may have been the best playoff game of his career because it had the game winner as well, but then in games 5, 6, 7, he fell off a cliff. He still is a 3-level scorer, even though the finishing ability isn't what it was. And then the concerns here, that's why they're in red. 33 years old, entering his age 34 season. How will he age as a guy who, on a whim, will go out to Las Vegas, hit up the strip club, and has his jersey retired in a Houston strip club? Like, the guy likes to have fun. You can't really knock him on that too much. He's living life, and any of us would like to live it with the amount of money that he has, but you also have a duty. You have a job to be in peak conditioning as an NBA player, especially when you're on a max deal. Way too inconsistent, in my opinion. He'll have a great game. He'll have a bad game. That Boston series was really the epitome of who Harden has been in some of these critical moments. No championship pedigree, and I don't really like his personality. I know that Harden loves ball. Coming out of high school, he goes to Arizona State, and yes, he was a high pick by the Oklahoma City Thunder. But it's not like this guy had the athleticism and the explosion of a Russell Westbrook. It's not like he had this crazy natural gift when it comes to the game of basketball. You can tell that from the early part of his career with OKC through Houston, even now, he's had to be very technical with his own basketball development. He loves the game of ball. But for Harden, as he ages, it's going to become more and more important for him to put more into his body to extend some of these good years. Another reminder, subscribe to us here on 76ers Now. We've been doing a bunch of live shows, pushing out content and sometimes multiple shows every single day. This is your one-stop shop for the best Sixers coverage here on YouTube. I understand it's a competitive industry. There are so many content options out there. That's why I'm so grateful that you decide to hang out with us as we're approaching 12,000 subs. And if you want to interact with me, let me know what you think about the show. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Chase_Senior. It's the same handle on both social media platforms.